a shot, this is the right behavior, this is the right acting, this is the right kind of, So you're constantly striving for the right, and then there is no right, and there is no wrong. And in the end, there is some truth in whatever it is, and how to recognize that truth in things, in being, in people, in character, in spaces, in objects, in animals, in anything. How to just recognize that truth, and that's something, the biggest thing I think we learned in that workshop which he's talking about.
Yeah, dwelling in grey between black and white.
Yes. Yeah, it's not even dwelling in grey, it's just dwelling, It's like, yeah, it could be black, it could be white also.
In the sense that for an artist, he would say that there's no sacred or profane spaces. All spaces are important. So there is no difference between a profane space or a sacred space. So something like that, yeah. So this is a beautiful book. This is called Uncloned Space. It was originally in Hindi. It's conversations between Mani Kaul and Udayan Vajpayee, who's a well-known poet in Hindi and a playwright and a screenplay writer. So they had a long conversation over the period of time, and it was called Abhed Akash in Hindi. And this is a beautiful translation called Uncloned Space, and it was translated by Gurvinder Singh. So I would request to randomly take a page and read from it, and we'll talk about it.
The random page is the pictures.
So the next page. You always play around randomness.
It's also pictures. Mani Kaul is all over pictures.
Yes, finally.
The question is, once you briefly touched upon the reasons that led to your aspirations of becoming a filmmaker. You spoke a little about your fondness for films. If you had become a doctor, you would have been able to identify many things from your childhood that would have pointed to your becoming a doctor when you grew up. From your past, what are the episodes in which we can find a clue to your becoming a filmmaker? This is a question posed to Mani Kaul. He answers, I had written something about this in an article, and coincidentally, I also gave the example of a doctor. I wrote there that a man selectively joins those memories, creates a world out of those memories that can explain what he has become as an adult. So in my case, I am trying to recall memories that are related to filmmaking. But if I had become a doctor instead, there are many incidents from my childhood that are quite directly related to medicine. A person slowly starts joining those things that create a new world for him. And there are many such things for me. For example, I used to have an interest in post-mortems. When I was a child, we used to live in a small town. There was a civil lines there, and we stayed in a bungalow allotted to my father. In older cities, the civil lines were usually outside the main city. Our civil lines was quite far off, right near the forest. There was a mortuary behind the civil lines. There was a stone bench on which the dead bodies were usually kept sometimes inside. The doctor in charge there, his name was O.P. Mathur, also used to stay in civil lines. Whenever a dead body was brought, I would run towards the compound wall, jump over it, cross a cluster of babul trees, and reach near the mortuary. I saw many kinds of dead bodies there. I don't know or why I developed this interest, but it was so much that I would even observe when they would take the bodies apart. I was 9 years old then, or maybe 10, and I was so interested that I ended up seeing so many different dead bodies. I can remember certain dead bodies even today. I cannot explain this peculiar interest. Even today I remember that once there was an exam in the school. I had to go to school at 10, and at about 8 a body arrived in the mortuary. The bodies were usually brought by a group of people, and they would arrive from different places. If people came from a village, they would bring the body on a bullock cart. Some people would come from the city for a post-mortem. All sorts, different kinds of people would come. Before that exam, I was roaming around the compound with my book in my hand. I still recall that it was a chemistry book, and I even remember there was an egg-shaped picture of something that someone had invented. I was looking at it and reading about that invention, and I can still remember that black and white egg-shaped picture on the page. At that moment, I saw a body arrive. I closed the book, and I still holding it in my hand. I jumped the wall and reached the mortuary. All sorts of bodies used to come there, like the dried up corpse of a dark old man, which barely had any flesh left on it. I remember the woman who had drowned her body had become her body had become swollen, and when they cut open her stomach, a strange kind of fountain spewed out of it. I saw horrible things like this. They didn't have much effect on me. The Supreme of Police lived in our neighborhood. One of his sons was studying in Jaipur. He didn't live in Jalore. It is the city of Jalore that I have been talking about. It was a very nice city, though it could hardly be called a city. It was more like a town then. There is a fort on top of a hill, which is of some historical significance. We used to climb that hill. There is a lake on top and some beautiful temples. There is a large gate where the British used to sit around. The railway station was quite far off. Jalore was a very strange place in my life. There is a professor at the Indian Institute of Technology here, Ravi Hazra, who teaches architecture. He also lived in Jalore with his family. His father was a judge. I met Rob recently. I also met his mother, Mrs. Hazra, whom we used to call Masi. They used to live in our neighborhood. She thinks of Jalore as a place of holy pilgrimage. There are so many memories of ours that I couldn't possibly recount. This was a major part of my life. My father was a very upright man. Throughout his life, he kept fighting with ministers and the like, and he would turn away anyone who approached him with a recommendation from some higher up official. I even happened to witness my father beating someone who had tried to bribe him with a shoe. There could have been a case filed against him because he beat that man so severely that he almost died just because he came to our house with money. He was this kind of a person, extremely strict in matters of honesty. Well, I used to consider it a kind of abnormality, and I would tell him later that when I had grown up and when we talked about the past, that if you were that honest, the shortage of money must have troubled you because the salary couldn't have been very much. He was honest to the extreme. I think in this book, for most of the questions, Manikal would reply with a story, with a very strong story. So they're all stories. You can read like hundreds of stories in the form of response to the questions. So how was the process for you, Gurvinder, translating this book from Hindi to English? And was it more, because you did spend quite a lot of time with Mani, but like, translating this would have given you more insights of that man.
Actually, I translated before I even met him. So actually through the translation I met him. This book, which was published as Abhed Akash in Hindi from Bhopal, somebody had given me a copy when I was a student in FTI. And at that time it was kind of, a lot of, we had just seen some of Manikal's films, and then to read this, there were a lot of ideas in it which were quite new, challenging, strange. There were a lot of strange things in the book, and this is a part about his childhood he's talking about, but then a lot of part is about philosophy and cinema and art and life and spirituality. So there's a lot more. And then I used to there was a strange attraction to his cinema, but I could not figure out that what it meant, why was he doing the way he was making films. His films were generally dismissed as slow and melancholic and very arty in a sense, and that it was, the cinema was considered unapproachable, and that it was only for the very informed, or say the very person with like very deep interest in cinema could only appreciate his film. And but then when I started reading Abhed Akash, I realized what he's talking about, the ideas they on surface seem very complicated. His films on surface seem very complicated, but they're actually very simple. They're very simple. And we unnecessarily try to ascribe meaning, and we are looking for things which don't exist. And for example, the fundamental thing about his cinema is that he says that he's trying to create, first of all, experience. He's trying to create experience. And now, like say, what is the experience of music? You listen to a rag, or somebody somebody plays the sitar for half an hour or 1 hour. Now, what meaning will you look for in that piece? You listen to Ravi Shankar, you listen again. You listen to some other music, you listen again. If you're involved in the listening, it is creating certain emotions, certain feelings. It is giving you an experience. You are involved in it. You could be doing something else, or you could be paying full attention to it. But then it has left you with certain impressions and certain feelings, and at some point you want to revisit it. So he said, he said, through my films I'm trying to create the same. To create impressions I'm looking at experience, and the word was what's the English word for experience? Anubhav. Yeah. So he said, eventually it's about creating anubhav, and why cannot cinema aspire to that kind of a condition, like music, where you revisit it, just for the experience of it. But then our intelligence wants to see meanings and story and connections, and so the thing is, if you start seeing his films from a conventional viewpoint, where you're looking for cause and effect, where you're looking for conflict, where you're looking for story, narrative, beginning, middle, end, where you're looking for a linear perspective, or a Renaissance kind of a perspective, or a Western perspective, you will be left with nothing. You will feel frustrated. So it required you to kind of get rid of all those notions, of conventional reading of a film, and just start observing the films as as a work of wonder, as if you're watching something which is. And the moment I felt so much at ease than watching his films, when I would just see it for the experience of it, relaxing, and not even wondering, not even thinking that what is happening. And that somehow influenced me so much, it became my way of watching any film. Yeah, it was so liberating, So and if I get lost in a film, I find it so beautiful. But if the film is holding me, wanting, demanding things, from me, of course, cinema has to demand, but it also has to let you free, it has to let you wander into your own world, into your own memories, especially, and then you connect, you could go, like you're watching the film, suddenly you get lost for a film for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and suddenly you come back, something in the film jolts you back into the film, and that's kind of viewing experience I personally enjoy. And if everything is clear, अगर सब कुछ स्पष्ट है स्क्रीन पर, मुझे लगता है मैं क्यों देख रहा हूँ if I am not the creator of this experience. Because any cinema or any art is not a one-way process. It's not like I have made a film and I'm projecting and you're receiving it. You are an equal participant. You are also the creator of the film. And if there are 50, 100 people sitting here, there will be 100 experiences, and there will be 100 kind of 100 films being played at the same time. And that is something which he valued and which he would aspire to. And the moment you realize that yes, this is another way of looking at the world, looking at art, looking at cinema, you felt so free.
And in the morning when I was watching your Avazan, there were two lines that stayed with me. Before invention of paper, poetry was there. Even before life, poetry was there. So, for me, Manikaul's films are sheer poetry. And there is very, very close, I see his films as extension of poetry. And both your films also, like you constantly, go to poetry and dig cinema from poetry. So, can you please elaborate on that?
Book by Tarkovsky called Sculpting Time. So here he makes a quotation or tries to make a connect between poetry and yes. So here Mani was very fond of this the following things which Tarkovsky makes as an observation. He says that haiku poetry and cinema, they are, he says apologetically that it's unfair to compare two art forms, like poetry being an independent and a very strong sort of presence, and cinema being an independent. But to compare these two, he was saying that haiku, the poetry, was very much close to the cinema, a poetic kind of cinema. So Manisa was very fond of haiku poetry, and he would find it as the absolute bliss or absolute pinnacle of poetry. So he was very fond of Basho as a poet. So he would quote Basho. He would say that how poetry is very similar to cinema. For instance, in Basho, you would have a certain very documentary sort of images. It is like it doesn't have anything quote unquote poetic or symbolic in it. It would be very normal or very ordinary sort of images. But through a certain juxtaposition of the images, through a certain combination of the images, resonance is created, poetry is created. So, for instance, in Basho, the poem he would quote is that an ancient pond is like a very ordinary sort of image. A frog jumped, again a very ordinary image, into the sound of water. So, but when this third image comes, an ancient pond, a frog jumps into the sound of it gives rise to 1,000 images in the mind. So he says that this cinema should be like that. So he has got a very unique way of connecting all these art forms. Something invisible which connects music. So when he was taking workshops for us, he would constantly speak about music, about paintings of Van Gogh, or about performing arts. So hardly he would say anything about cinema. But all of these things would lead to cinema in one way or the other. For instance, he had spoken once about Kudiyatam performance. He was saying that your film should be like a Kudiyatam performance, like a Nangyar Kuthu performance. What he meant was that in a Nangyar Kuthu, Nangyar Kuthu is a kind of a traditional Sanskrit theatre. It's about 2,000 years old. So here, what happens is that a woman performs. A single woman performs. Usually epics and usually from Kalidasa or some of the epics, Bhasa's plays or Kalidasa's plays. But the thing is that it's like a 3-hour performance. They would take about 2 verses from the Bhasa's plays and perform it for 2 hours. But the interesting thing is that hardly a word would be uttered during the whole performance. So they would convey this whole drama, theatrical performance using eye movements, netra abhinayam as they would call, or hand movements, mudras, and so it is a very stunning, very absolutely mesmerizing sort of a performance. Like you will be completely transformed into a different world. Like an antiquity would come before your eyes, and only at the very end of the performance would they utter 2 verses, which throws light on the whole performance. So what he was trying to say is that your film should have that sort of a quality. Like a very Brazilian sort of a quality in cinema, where images and sounds should speak, the experiences or the sensuousness of the medium itself should speak rather than words. So this was the idea. So in a way, I was that 2 words from him about how made me look closer into an art form like Kudiyatam. I had seen it during college days, but I had seen it not in that way. I had seen it very lightly. But later, I made a film on Kapila, so which was basically an inspiration from this. So, and later, when I made this film called Aiden also, this was an adaptation from literature. But we were trying to transform something from literature to cinema. How a certain transformation would happen when this medium happens, or an independent sort of a thing, so that cinema stands on by itself. So I think the workshop with Manikol gave us a certain courage to find our own ways, or to look for something new, and not to be afraid of that.
I think in this book also Mani sir talks about his first experience watching Pickpocket by Bresson and how that gave him so much of mindfulness that after watching the film when he was standing under the tree he could actually hear the leaf twirling in the wind. So it is all about mindfulness. I think that is poetry. I think constantly Manikal turns us into poetry, and I see that quality in Gurvinder's film also. In the shot which he was showing in the morning, inspired by Marco's short story, even the characters were exchanging poetry rather than dialogue. It was like, even each and every character were exchanging poetry between each other. The mundane suddenly becomes so beautiful with that kind of poetry. I would like to hear more from you, Gurvinder.
Yeah, few things like what Sanju, the example of Basho's poetry gave. Actually, this is something very kind of, the application of that for cinema. That how one image gets transformed by contact with another image. And the image actually formed is between the two. The visible is of course an image, but then it's forming an invisible image. The idea is invisible. So it has to go beyond the visual. There is no image without transformation actually. Otherwise it's just fixed. It's what you see is what you get. What's behind? What's not revealed? What's not told? Like today morning I was talking about that cinema is not only what you tell, but also what you don't tell. So if you're making a film on a particular subject, it's not about only about telling about that subject, but also not telling about that subject and telling about something else which informs that subject, which reveals that subject or which has a kind of a counterpoint to that subject. To have a counterpoint, like to show silence. To show sound, you need silence. Silence creates sounds. John Cage said that. So these kind of ideas, and then importantly, yes, transformation, and then he would quote a lot from Bresson. I think for me, Bresson's notes on the cinematograph is a very seminal text for any filmmaker. In fact, Bresson is a filmmaker's filmmaker. Yes, in a way, yes, but even in fact more than money actually. I don't think because recently I just had a workshop at the NIT National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, and they had not even heard of Bresson, and I showed them L'Argent, and they were stunned, they said, when they saw the film and they thought that it was so modern in the sense because it was making them participate. Like, they felt almost like it was like they were watching a Hollywood film, And I was like very surprised with their actions because they could thread the story. It's not easy to thread the story. But because the way they have used to, because of non-linear way of thinking and imagination, because of internet and everything and our minds constantly scattered, they were suddenly made to focus and deduce a story, to take out the story from the film. And I said, I could never do that, when I was watching the film. So, and then when you talk to them, the idea of ellipses, that what is actually the crux is never shown. It's only the peripheral, It's like he's just giving you hints in the story, and then you have to fill the story yourself. It's like it's like a puzzle. Not even a puzzle. It's like one of those things. You have in a word you're given two letters, and then you have to complete the word. Bresson is exactly like that. He just gives you two letters, and then you have to fill in the rest of the letters. Like there's a beautiful scene in L'Argent where this man who's now in the prison, and he receives a letter from his girlfriend that So the letter comes in the prison. First, it's read by the staff, by the women who are censoring the letters. They are reading the prisoner's letters before it goes to the prisoner. So they read the letter, and in the letter you see that his daughter has died. And then you see that he's lying, terribly like shaken or disturbed, and he's almost crying. And the letter is lying on the floor. Third, the two inmates who are his cellmates, they pick up the letter and read. So two people to whom the letter doesn't belong, they read the letter. This is like, so the person who is affected is just shown disturbed and lying and crying, but he is not shown reading the letter. So it's it's just information which is kind of projected on this character. So this is transformation, what it is, it's now making you go into the mind of that person, but you actually don't see him react to the letter. And for me, the other important idea which Mani kind of made me kind of other than the fact that we have to look beyond duality, was that that he would Sanjay would correct would also talk about it, that in the class he would never kind of impose his own idea of that this is right or this is wrong. Like he would not be judgmental about our work, whatever we showed. He would never say that what you've done is, you could have done it like this, or you could have done it like that. It could have been more effective. Like normally, you show something to your teacher, you want feedback from somebody, and then the person says, okay, you might have done it like this, or this is not working, this could have worked. Never, he would never say that this is not working, or you could have done it the other way. He would only take out something from there which was so unique to you. So he would constantly emphasize on your swabhav. You see, Sanju's swabhav is different from my swabhav. Your swabhav is different from our swabhav. तो आपका जो स्वभाव है वो आपको पहचानना है. You have to find your own nature. You have to recognize your own nature. And then this whole struggle about trying to look for something unique, something which others are not. What is this? What is the struggle for making something original? What is original? You are original. He is original. Everybody sitting here is original. The only thing is we have to recognize that what is original about us. Everybody's way of looking at the world is different from the other. But we have been conditioned that we start seeing the world from the other's eyes, from others' viewpoints. We start accepting others' opinions. But fine, as inspiration it's fine. You see how others react, how others see, what they like, what they don't like. But at the end we are, we are what we are, and we have to recognize ourselves. I'm not saying you can be respectful of others' way of looking, but in the end you have to find your own way of looking at things. And if that way of looking is wrong, it's not accepted by the others, but there's a truth in it, and if you recognize that truth, and if you are able to transpose that truth in your work, it will automatically be truthful and original. And so if if I used to think maybe I cannot do certain thing like this, then I would say no, but I can do it another way. If I want to construct a scene where I only want to show close-ups, maybe I just want to show close-ups, and maybe I don't want to show the whole, or maybe I just want to show the whole and not get into it. So there is no right or wrong. Eventually, any art actually has no rules. People say cinema has a grammar. What is the grammar of cinema? Cinema has no grammar. Cinema only has conventions. And they are touted as grammar to us, as if something we have to accept and believe in, It's not language. Language has grammar, language has rules. If I change around my words, it will not make sense. To make sense, I have to say my words in a certain order, because that has. But in film, if you make the images go here, there, you know, it will still make some sense. I cannot say it is wrong. I can say, okay, I'm not able to understand, you know. I mean, maybe I'm not able to get the sequence of images, you know, but yes, but they're still leaving certain impressions on you. So there is no rule, it is only convention. And those conventions, you know, like the Hollywood conventions or, you know, other conventions, we start accepting as gospel truth. And they are touted as grammar to us, as if something we have to accept and believe in, you know. It's not language. Language has grammar, language has rules. If I change around my words, it will not make sense. You know?